November is Native American Heritage Month. You may have heard Native peoples called Native Americans or Indians or Indigenous people. And you probably read some stories or heard some stories like Champlain and the Silent One, or When the Corn Grows Ripe, or some other stories. Maybe even you read Warriors, which was a book that was on our summer reading list. Several of those are stories that take place in the past. And I think a lot of people, when they think of Native Americans, they think of Thanksgiving and things that happened a long time ago, or maybe they think of Pocahontas, something very stereotypical. But there are Native Americans that live in the modern day, and the book that we're going to be reading for this first chapter, Fridays, is a collection of modern day stories about modern day Indigenous people. This week's first chapter, Friday, is from what's called an anthology, which is a collection of stories, and this collection is called Ancestor Approved, Intertribal Stories for Kids. And it's edited. It has a bunch of different authors because it's an anthology. Every story has a different author. Edited by Cynthia Leitich Smith. So the first thing that I'm going to read you is the introduction, or what's called the foreword. Imagine you're attending an intertribal powwow. Maybe it's your first time. Maybe your family has been on the powwow trail for generations. You might make new friends or reunite with old ones. In line for fry bread, you could strike up a conversation with a vendor and buy a keychain from them later that day. From the bleachers, you could admire a dancer's shawl and that night recognize her wearing everyday clothes on the way home. Through stories, poetry, and visual art, the contributors to this anthology coordinated their efforts via phone calls, emails, texts, and an online task board to reflect the interconnectedness of the powwow experience. We filled this book with memorable characters, some of whom know each other, some of whom don't, and all of whom are pleased to welcome you. And as you heard in the foreword, this whole book, even though they're all different stories written by different people, they all have a central theme, which is the theme of the powwow. So if you don't know what a powwow is, this first there's a little sort of a poem, sort of a narrative verse in the very beginning here that will explain a little bit about what a powwow is if you've never been. It's called What is a Powwow by Kim Rogers. A powwow is friends and family gathered together to honor their creator, Kinnikasas, man never known on earth, who watches over us. A powwow is a way to remember those who've passed on, even ancestors we did not know, who stay in our hearts forever. They are near us always. A powwow is a place to show our resilience and strength. We are still here, generation after generation, into the future and beyond. A powwow is drums and songs and dancing and jingles, feathers, shawls, and beaded buckskin, regalia. You and your family made with love. A powwow is eating fry bread and corn soup together, selling or buying artwork, jewelry, and t-shirts that everyone would be proud to take home. A powwow is prizes and recognition, but community is the best prize of all. A powwow is a place for belly laughing late into a sleepy night with your Grandpa Lou, then getting home after midnight. A powwow is where our hearts beat as one to the thump of the drum, together, so strong, where we belong. A powwow is healing and soul-soothing, pure joy, a circle of life, where the Creator, Kinnikasas, man never known on earth, smiles upon us. Chapter 1 of Ancestor Approved is called Fancy Dancer by Monique Gray Smith. Mom walked a bit lighter on the earth. My little sister Susie giggled louder. And I gained a dad. Most people would call him my stepdad, but there's nothing step about him at all. My father, the man whose genes run through me, had left 2 years earlier when I was 9. One day, he just never came home from work. Mom tried to explain it to us, but we already knew that things weren't good between them. Kids know. Adults don't think we do, but we do. What I didn't expect was that he never came to see us. He never phoned, ever. It was hard to see how much Susie missed him. You probably think that as his son, I might have been sad, but I wasn't. I was the opposite. You see, my father was not a kind man, not to me or my sister, and especially not to my mom. That was the hardest part of all, watching how he hurt my mom. His temper was only one reason why I was relieved when he left. When my parents found out they were pregnant with me, my father moved Mom far away from Saskatchewan and her family. While she kept in touch through email, I had never met my grandparents, aunties, uncles, or any of my cousins. No one had ever come to visit us, and we'd never gone to visit them. I looked it up on a map once, and Saskatchewan, Canada, is pretty far away from Ann Arbor, Michigan. My father never said it, but I'm pretty sure he hated that my mom was Cree. Why else would he forbid her to speak Cree in our house, or practice our ceremonies, or do anything at all that was part of our culture? I do have one memory of my mom celebrating her culture. I was about 7 or 8. It was the middle of the night, and I was thirsty, so I headed to the kitchen to get a drink. As I got close, I noticed a light flickering and music playing. The music was new to me, but the drum beat was powerful, like it was calling me closer. I peeked around the corner to see what was going on in the kitchen, and there was my mom, dancing. She stood tall, her head high, shoulders back, and her feet softly moved to the beat of the drum. In her hand was what looked like a bundle of feathers, and, just like her feet, she moved it to the sound of the drum. I watched until the music stopped and Mom blew out the candle. I made my way back to bed without her knowing that I had seen her dancing. That night I learned something really important. But now, I'd always known that my mom was strong. But now I knew she was way stronger than I thought. In the middle of the night, she was keeping her culture, our culture, alive. 9 years of living with my father meant I knew almost nothing about who I truly was. I'm pretty sure he was ashamed of us, or at least that's how it felt. He often told Susie and me that we'd be better off in life if we looked more like him and his Irish ancestors, but we didn't. There was no questioning that we were native. I always knew Mom was proud of me, and that was all I needed. At least that's what I thought, until she brought Paul home. Paul quickly became a regular at our dinner table and around our house. He's Cree, like us, but from Treaty 8 territory in Alberta. He came to teach for a semester and loved it so much he stayed. Paul and Mom both work at the University of Michigan. That's where they met. He came into the library looking for a specific book, and my mom, who's a librarian, helped him find it. They've been pretty much inseparable since then. Not long after Paul came into our lives, Mom got back in touch with her family, our family. Although we hadn't been able to go to Saskatchewan to meet them, we were using FaceTime a couple of times a week. I was liking getting to know everyone, and there were a lot of them. I liked knowing I was part of a big family and that I looked like them. I especially loved watching how Mom laughed with her siblings. Now Mom walks every day just like she did the night I saw her dancing, head high, shoulders back. A couple of months after Paul moved in, we were driving home from a good day of fishing out at Olsen Park when he turned on the stereo. Out of the speakers came the same music that Mom had on the night I saw her dancing in the kitchen. The drum beat went right to my heart. I could feel the rhythm, and my head began to move to the beat. "You ever been to a powwow?" Paul asked. "A what?" Guess that answers my question. "What's a powwow?" I asked him. "Only one of the greatest weekend events ever." And? He glanced at me and could see I really had no idea what a powwow was. Well, where do I begin? It's both a ceremony and cultural gathering where we sing, dance, visit, and laugh. There's always a heck of a lot of laughing, Paul chuckled. Then there's food. My mouth waters just thinking about the fry bread loaded with butter and salt. Oh, and we can't forget Indian tacos. He turned to me with a grin. No powwow is complete without at least one Indian taco. Paul wiped the back of his hand across his mouth. After a moment he added, but really, for me and how I was raised, powwow is a way of honoring our traditions, our families, and our ancestors. Is it just us? I asked. Native Americans? Our family had hidden who we were for so long that I wasn't sure what to call us. Mostly, yes. Native people travel from all over to go to powwows, but non-natives are welcome too. That's part of the beauty of the powwow, the sharing of cultures. He turned his head toward me. We have one of the biggest powwows in the United States right here in Ann Arbor. It's called the Dance for Mother Earth Powwow. Really? Paul nodded. I noticed you dancing in your seat. I think you have the moves to be a fancy dancer. Okay, first of all, I don't even know what a fancy dancer is. And second, my father's voice rang through my mind. Hope you got some brains in that head of yours, 'cause you sure ain't got any hopes of being on any sports team. He had laughed and then mocked me some more. Unless you plan on being the water boy, but you probably screw that up too. I leaned my head against the window. I'm not good at anything that requires coordination, like sports, so I'd probably suck at that fancy dance thing. As we drove along the Pontiac Trail, I watched the trees go by and wondered if I'd ever stop hearing my father's voice inside my head. We were almost home when Paul started talking again. Your mom's told me some of the stories of how your dad treated you, how he treated all of you. He looked over at me for a moment and then back at the road. I'm sorry that happened. Why are you sorry? You didn't do anything. You're right, I didn't, but I can still be sorry that you had to experience that. No child or woman should ever be treated like you, Susie, and your mom were. It helps me understand a little bit why you think you wouldn't be any good at fancy dancing. But for what it's worth, I think you could be good. Dancing isn't just about being athletic. It's about telling a story to the drumbeat and revealing the strength that is in your heart. Paul was quiet until we pulled into our driveway. He put the truck in park and turned to me. There's a lot of strength in your heart, Rory. You can let the unkind things your father said define you, or what I said. Or you can define yourself, including what you want to be good at. There are always going to be people who want to pull you down. That's the hurt in their heart. But it's up to you whether you let them succeed. We sat in silence, except for the powerful beat coming out of the speakers. Paul was using his thumb on the steering wheel to keep up with the drum. My upper body began moving to the beat again. This time my head bobbed a bit, forward and back and side to side. You know, Rory, I was quite a fancy dancer back in the day. If you wanted, I could teach you. I turned to look at him. Really? Sure, I'd love to. Hesitantly, I responded, Okay, might help if I knew what a fancy dancer was. Paul laughed. I suppose it would. That's what the first class will cover, tomorrow night. Why not now? Or tonight? Paul laughed again and slammed the steering wheel with his hand. See, I knew there was a dancer in there. Give me a night to clear out the garage. We're going to need space for you to get your moves on. I can help you clean it. I was counting on that. Paul turned to me and tousled my hair. Maybe we can get your mom and Susie to help us. After dinner, the overhaul from garage to dance floor began. We had to clear out all the winter and summer toys we no longer used, old paint cans and bits of clothes that Mom had saved from when Susie and I were little. The next night, I had my first fancy dance lesson. We started by smudging. At first, I didn't know what to do. Paul showed me how to take the smoke from the sage in my hands and run it over my head and then down my body. He explained it was like having a shower, but instead of cleaning my body, it cleaned my spirit. Paul said smudging would help me feel good inside, and he was right. There was something about the smell of burning sage that gave me a peaceful feeling. When Paul turned on the music, he told me, just close your eyes. Let the drum beat and the song wake you up. Notice your breathing. Breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. My body wanted to move, but I was afraid to give in to the urge. I was afraid I wouldn't do it right. It was like Paul could read my mind. It's okay, Rory. There's no right way, only your way. He put his hands on my shoulders and looked me in the eyes. Your body remembers how to dance. Your ancestors have been dancing like this for generations. His hands moved up to cradle my face. Trust yourself. Paul dropped his hands and took a step back. I want you to start by moving your head. Feel the drum beat move through you. After a couple of months of practicing 2 nights a week, I could feel my whole body getting stronger. I loved both the dancing and the smudging, but especially the time with Paul. It was an icy cold January morning when I found it, lying there in front of my cereal bowl, a flyer for the annual Dance for Mother Earth powwow. On the flyer, Paul had written, "I think you could be ready to dance at this, but it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what you think. Love, Paul." I shoved the flyer into my backpack and left for school. At lunch, I pulled it out again as I began to eat my ham and cheese sandwich. I could just imagine what my father would say. "How Indian are you trying to be, Rory?" Maybe he was right, but I felt different when I danced. More like me. It was all so confusing. I crushed the flyer into a tiny ball and tossed it into the garbage with the rest of my uneaten sandwich. That night, I pretended to have a sore tummy. I excused myself from dinner and my night of dancing with Paul. I was lying on my bed feeling sorry for myself when there was a knock at the door. "Yeah?" Paul opened the door a smudge. "Can I come in?" "I suppose." He came in and sat on the side of my bed. "If you can't come to the garage to dance, then the dancing is going to come to you." "I really don't feel like it." "I know. That's why I brought some homework for you." I rolled my eyes at the word homework. Paul reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. "If I'd had homework like what I'm about to give you, my life sure would have been different." I watched as he opened his wallet, pulled out an iTunes gift card, and placed it beside me on the bed. "I want you to go online and download your favorite powwow music. That's the first part of your homework." I tried not to, but I couldn't help it. A smile crept across my face. "Then I want you to practice standing on one foot at a time, up on your tippy toes. I want you to focus on your breathing like I showed you. We have to get your mind and body believing each other." I gave him a "what are you talking about" look. "The song is the bridge between your mind and your body. But right now, your mind and your body don't trust each other. We have to build that bridge of trust. When you truly learn to believe in yourself, all of you, then that is the greatest gift learning to fancy dance will give you." That night, I practiced my balance, and then, when I lay in bed, listening to my favorite songs, I felt a determination I'd never felt before. I decided I was going to prove my father wrong, but mostly I was going to prove to myself that I could do it. I was going to dance at the powwow. I was going to be proud of who I was. The next morning, over a bowl of mush and blueberries, I announced, "So I'm going to do it." "Do what?" asked my sister as she shoved oatmeal into her mouth. "I'm going to enter the junior boys' fancy dance at the powwow." "Yes!" Paul said loudly and raised his fist straight up. Mom reached over and hugged me. "Oh, my boy, I'm proud of you." I had just over 2 months to get ready, and not just physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually too. A couple of weeks later, I found 2 boxes on my bed. One was large, and the other was ginormous. I noticed the return address was my mom's home community in Saskatchewan. I opened the large one first and pulled out the most beautiful regalia. If you don't know what regalia is, it's the outfit that he's going to wear at the powwow. I'd been watching fancy dancing on YouTube and hadn't seen anything quite like this. It was turquoise, white, and black, and when I held it up to myself, I knew it would fit. I quickly opened the ginormous box, wondering if maybe it had a bustle in it. Sure enough, wrapped very carefully in tissue paper, was a bustle that matched. At the bottom of the box, there was a letter. I sat down on my bed and opened it. "Nephew, I want you to have my regalia. Dance it proudly. Make it come alive again, just like I used to. If the feathers got a bit squished, ask your mom to steam them. She'll remember how. I hope to see you dance one day. Hey, you should come home for our powwow. I could teach you some of my moves. It's going to be a real good day when that happens. Uncle Fred." Come home. Those words put tears in my eyes. I'd always thought of Ann Arbor as home, but I was beginning to wonder if there were lots of places to call home. I talked to Mom later about going home to the powwow, but for now I had to focus on the Dance for Mother Earth powwow. As the weekend of the powwow approached, Paul and I spent time going over how the judges would be scoring the dancers. Not that I expected to win or anything, but I needed to know what they'd be looking for so I could make sure I did my best. I wanted my family to be proud of me. To be honest, I wanted to be proud of me. Paul had written out the judging criteria for me. Dance style, stopping, over understep. Regalia, authenticity, footwear. Attitude, sportsmanship. Judges' call on song quality. No points if any items dropped. Regalia, this one you're going to rock, Paul said with a smile. I had to agree. My regalia was awesome. Just then, Mom came into the kitchen and placed a package on the table in front of me. For you, she said, and kissed my cheek. Open it. Okay. I pulled the white tissue off to find a stunning pair of moccasins. I looked at her. For me? Her eyes glistened. Yes, Rory, for you. Wow, Mom, these are gorgeous. They were tanned moose hide. The tops were covered with white beads, with black beads in the middle to create an eagle with a turquoise circle around it. Around the ankles was white rabbit fur. I lifted them to my nose. They smell so good. Where'd you get them? I made them. My eyes got big. You made these? Yes, I made them. A smile spread across her face. I liked seeing her happy. Paul pulled Mom in for a hug. Lila, my love, you never cease to surprise me. I stood up and squished myself into their hug. Thank you, Mom. Thank you. Mom pulled away and held my face in her hands. I'm so proud of you, Rory. Now don't let me interrupt you two any longer. She turned to leave the kitchen. I think you have some more strategizing to do. That we do, Paul said. I sat back down, smelled my new moccasins one more time, and then put them on. Now you're really going to rock the regalia category. Paul smiled at me and looked down at the judging criteria. Okay, next category, attitude and sportsmanship. Finally, the day we've been planning for arrived. I danced in the grand entry at the start of the powwow. I wasn't too nervous because all of us dancers were part of it, but when it came time for Junior Boys Fancy Dance, everything changed. I stood near the entrance to the Skyline High School gym, and Paul adjusted my headpiece. Ready? He asked. I shook my head. I need more time. The other dancers looked calm and confident. Look at me, my boy. Paul took my chin between his thumb and forefinger. Don't be comparing yourself to the other dancers. When you walk out there, you breathe deep. Feel those ancestors with you, and on that first drum beat, feel their love come alive in you. I gave a slight nod. The first time I danced, I was afraid, shaking so hard my feathers were jiggling. But I've learned that sometimes in life, you gotta be brave before you can be good. So that's what I want you to do, Rory. He motioned his head out to the gym. Go out there and be brave. The good will come. Just then, the powwow MC announced, It's time for the Junior Boys Fancy Dance. I took the biggest deep breath I'd ever taken and turned to enter the gym. Rory, Paul called out to me. I looked back at him and realized I never would have gotten here without him. Actually, so much of who I was, who our family had become, and my life now was because of him. He smiled at me. Kisa kehitin. I smiled back at him and felt myself relax. Kisa kehitin. Dad. The arena director was motioning for me to keep moving. I took my place in the flow of dancers entering the gym. I shook my head, rolled my neck, lifted my shoulders, and planted my feet solidly. I leaned forward, trying to see past the other dancers, to scan the bleachers for where my mom, sister, and Paul were sitting. When I found them, I gave a nod, and they all waved. I could see my mom wiping tears from her eyes. She put her hand on her heart. I closed my eyes and offered a silent prayer. Ancestors, grandfathers and grandmothers of the 4 sacred directions, this is your grandson, Rory. I come before you in a humble manner and ask you to be with me as I dance for the first time. Kinaskohomitin. The MC announced, Host drum, you're up. Aho, aho. Junior boys fancy dance. It's powwow time. Let's see what you got, boys. With the first beat of the drum, I began to dance. I twisted, dipped, bobbed. I felt alive, proud, free.